This time on Watchers of Tomorrow, Spock dumps all their fuel, dooming them all.
Hello everyone, my name is Gepwin. I am joined as always by my friend Dr. Isix.
Hi.
And this is Watchers of Tomorrow, the sci-fi review, critique, etc. show where we are currently working our way through the original series of Star Trek.
Yes, it's original.
I almost said the original series of Star Trek The Next Generation because I just have those so melded in my brain.
The original series of Star Trek Next Generation of
This
Nine.
is the prequel to Next Generation. I mean, in my mind, it actually kind of works out that way because I was so familiar with Next Gen and everything that came after it before I started watching this. So to me, this is a prequel series.
I guess in some ways then, let's compare it to a different sci-fi franchise then. How does, as far as prequel stuff goes, how does this match up to the Star Wars prequels for you so far?
I'd have to say about the same, honestly. It explains stuff that no one cared about. It's not as well written, and the characters suffer.
So, seems like George Lucas got his lessons from somewhere then.
This episode is the Galileo 7.
Yes. So in case there's confusion about other Galileos and their sevens.
Yeah, whichever other seventh Galileo. It was written by Oliver Crawford, who I want to spend a little bit of time mentioning because he is more interesting than anything that happens in this episode.
Oh, how is that?
He was blacklisted by the House Un-American Activities Committee in 1953 for not giving away names as, quote-unquote communist sympathizers.
So for folks unfamiliar with the House Un-American Committee, it's sort of the quote McCarthyism, Red Scare stuff in the 50s there. Basically, they were kind of super paranoid about like Soviet infiltration of the U.S. And then people were like, well, maybe I could use that to sort of like get back at some of my political enemies too. And so it's all sort of wrapped up together, mix of like kind of legit investigations that sometimes led to somewhere interesting, but a lot of like, well, we don't like you, so we're going to investigate you, and you can admit to being the most evil person in the universe, and we'll let you off with a only slap on the wrist if you also point us to other people we can make suffer for a while. It's very Salem witch trials sort of thing here.
Well, these particular ones were often used to kind of silence pro-labor people. Yes. So anyone who was in a union, a lot of TV writers got caught up in this because of the Writers Guild stuff that was going on at the time.
Mm-hmm. So it's like, well, we don't like unions because various reasons. Just because you hate unions in general, like you're pro big business or something like that, and you're like, oh, I want to crush these, so I'm going to, just kind of have this excuse for pulling this lever of power to try to break up these organizations and take down key people involved, to try to discredit them or put them in jail.
But our guy Crawford here was blacklisted in the early 50s, worked a few odd jobs here and there, and then got rehired onto television writing in 1957 to become what is described as one of the most prolific and successful television writers of all time.
It's like he has some talent, guys. I guess it's sort of one of those best revenge is living well sort of situations.
Yes. So everything pretty much worked out for him. I just thought it was interesting, and nothing else in this episode is, so.
Gotta have something, right?
We are guest starring this episode Don Marshall as Lieutenant Boma, Peter Marco as Lieutenant Gaetano,
which I like spelled like 5 different ways because the version of I was listening to it's like, is it Catano, Gaetano, Ritano? Come on, guys, a little more enunciation here.
This is an Italian name. I know someone with this name, and you can abbreviate it to Nino, which is a lot easier to say and spell.
Nice.
We have Phyllis Douglas as Yeoman Miraz, who's the new yeoman for the episode.
I believe actor-wise she comes back once, but that's about it.
Yeah, I think so in like season 3, though.
Is a different person.
It's going to be a while. Have Reese Vaughan, it's a very complicated last name, as Lieutenant Latimer. Grant Woods as Lieutenant Kowalski. Kowalski? Yeah.
Kowalski. Sorry, what?
Anyway, I'm going to mispronounce that one a lot. It starts with a K and ends with a Z, is the main thing to remember.
We'll call him K.
And finally, John Crawford as Commissioner Ferris.
Oh, yes.
High Commissioner Ferris.
That's a highfalutin title he's got there.
Yeah, he's apparently somehow able to order the captain around in a weird, undisclosed manner.
Yes, it's like I'm somewhere in the chain of command, maybe. It's a little ambiguous.
Yeah, a random way to give orders. Oh, we open with the captain's log.
Yes.
The Enterprise is carrying medical supplies to planet Marcus 3, but on the way they are here to investigate a quasar-like formation called Murasaki 312. They are accompanied by sentient ticking clock High Commissioner Ferris.
Because it'll be more clear why that's the case later on.
Yes. Also, I heard you tell us why this doesn't make any sense.
All right, so if they were in our galaxy flying by a quasar, that kind of implies our galaxy is the process of being destroyed.
Well, my research was just a quasar is the phenomenon that forms around a supermassive black hole.
Correct. Well, specifically, it's a what's called a active galactic nucleus, or nuclei, or whatever it is. I'm terrible with that word, but it's highly energetic. It's a a large amount of material, gases and plasmas falling into the black hole, and it's all getting wrapped up in a accretion disk that is very energetic. And as the strong gravitational forces are all involved, and all the particles are trying to interact and basically get into the queue to fall into this thing, they're all running into each other, heating up, and it just all sorts of energetic madness. And it's a phenomenon that's so excessively bright. People, when they first started seeing these out in space, is like, what the heck is this? This doesn't make any sense. Kind of like a star, but it's like way further away. Like, it's not a galaxy exactly, though it might be. But long story short, if they were this close to a quasar, everyone on the Enterprise would be dead.
Also, this thing, in our galaxy, only exists at the center.
Yes.
Right?
The supermassive black hole in the Milky Way galaxy is Sagittarius A star, as like asterisk, exists. There's only one of them in our galaxy, to the center of the galaxy. It is very, very large. It's a big boy, and it is not an active, a galactic formation. It's not a quasar. It's only a supermassive black hole that happens to be at the center of our galaxy. It might have been a quasar at one point, but it's not the case anymore. Yeah.
All right. Well, they get away with it, sci-fi babble-wise, by saying it is a quasar-like phenomenon.
Yes. Which they should have just said, it's a black hole with an accretion disk.
Yeah, but I guess they hadn't quite figured black holes out at this point. Yeah. So we're still, mid-60s here.
I will also point out that if this had been written, say, 2 or 3 years later, they could have said, this is a pulsar. But pulsars had not been discovered when this became, was put on the air. So.
Oh, that's why everything in Next Generation is a pulsar.
Exactly.
The Spock and company are preparing to depart in the titular shuttlecraft.
Mm-hmm.
Ferris, High Commissioner Ferris, is opposed to this delay because he wants to get somewhere.
Yes. Some sort of supply run.
But Kirk has standing orders to investigate any quasar-looking stuff that he happens to find. And also, they have 2 days to spare before they need to make their rendezvous anyway.
So plenty of time. Nothing will go wrong, for sure.
They launch the shuttlecraft, which in the remastered versions we got, is way too much CGI.
A little bit, yeah.
I looked up the comparison. There's a lot of comparisons online of original effects to new effects. The original effects for this are fine. They're really good model work. You didn't need to CGI the entire set. All right, so rant over. Yeah. They launch the shuttle, but as soon as they do, things go wrong, and the shuttle is pulled into Murasaki 312.
Oh no. Bad stuff's happening. Everyone's doomed.
On the Enterprise, they've lost contact with the shuttle. None of their sensors or instruments are functioning. And this thing apparently is the size of 3 entire solar systems.
Well, that is pretty big, actually.
Yeah.
But it's not like quasar-like big.
Kirk says that finding a needle in a haystack would be child's play in comparison to finding their lost shuttle.
That makes sense. This is a pretty big space, and they're everything's ionized, so their sensors don't work, which I think we've already established in Star Trek is a thing, which actually kind of makes sense when you think about it. But anyway.
Yeah, they hate ions. Ions break all of their equipment all the time.
It does imply that they are using effectively the equivalent of modern-day radar as frequencies that are easily stopped by ionized materials.
Yeah, they kind of go into like how they're using active sensor scanning quite a bit here, which would suggest they're sending out a pulse of something that has to bounce off of things and come back.
Yeah, so it's not like future waves that pass through space and time in a funny fashion. It's just probably just radio waves. It's just
more complicated radio waves.
It's extra Doppler.
They cut to Commissioner Ferris, who has what looks like a really amused reaction shot that I do not know why is there.
Well, maybe he's like, I've tricked them into doing this thing I didn't want to do. Uh-oh.
We have the credits and then the captain's log, where 7 of the crew is lost and the Enterprise is as good as blind.
Oh no, everyone's doomed.
Ferris is really angry that losing some crew members may have delayed their shipment of medical supplies.
So people are dead, potentially, and that's bad, but medical supplies? Well, I guess it makes more clear how urgent this is later, but at this point, it's still like, really?
But Kirk says that he still has 2 days to search, and Uhura reports that there's only one planet in the anomaly that is Class M, capable of sustaining human life. I think that's maybe our first Class M classification.
I think that's the case, too. And this is actually super convenient, too, that they just sort of have a planet there.
Yeah, it's the only one that if they crashed on, they could live, so let's search there. It is in the dead center of the Murasaki effect, so it's on the black hole.
Well, I guess maybe it's conceivably not right on the edge of the black hole, but like in the maximum thickness of the ionization field or something like that.
Yeah, maybe. They're very unclear how any of this thing works. It's a big space blob that keeps them from using sensors is the thing. That's all you need.
I guess as far as the physics go, that would sort of, being in a location that is effectively getting superheated by the, in-spiraling plasmas might be enough to generate the light for an effective day on the planet, which actually kind of interesting sort of, they probably didn't think of this, but it's kind of a clever sort of way to set up situation. Of course, the planet's still doomed, but
Yeah, I mean, it's just, it doesn't matter. Yeah. We don't see this planet again.
Yep.
On the planet, the shuttle has crash landed, but all 7 crew members are alive. We have Spock, who is in command of the mission. McCoy and Scotty are also there. They are joined by random crew members, Boma, Gaetano, Latimer, and Yeoman Mires, who are all unharmed except for some very minor scrapes and bruises.
So they're in good shape for falling from orbit.
Spock tries to call the Enterprise for help, and it doesn't work. Scotty asks why he expected it to work, but Spock says that he didn't. It's just logical to try every alternative.
Kind of reasonable, are there other alternatives that are more effective?
You're going to get really sick of hearing the word logic in this episode.
Yes.
McCoy reports that they can indeed breathe, so Latimer and Gaetano are told to grab phasers and go out to scout the area.
Let's go exploring. Maybe we can find a civilization here that has technology to cut through the ionization and contact the Enterprise.
That'd be great.
Yeah.
Spock explains their situation to McCoy, that since the Enterprise will have no way to search for them without sensors, they are going to have to get airborne if they have any chance of being found at all. Mm-hmm. On the bridge, no one is having any luck finding the shuttle. The transporter's not working, and Kirk launches a second shuttlecraft to search for the first one.
So you're on this plane in the middle of the worst of the ionization here, and you lost a shuttle due to that ionization, and so you're sending out another shuttle into the ionization to look for the first shuttle.
Yep. Also,
all right.
Fine, the sensors don't work. Great. The transporter's not working. We don't need. It's unnecessary information.
Just sort of extra drama for no purpose.
Yeah. Ferris is unhelpfully pessimistic about finding the crew and orders that Kirk can't take 1 second longer than his 2-day search window.
Real nice guy, aren't you, Ferris?
Yeah, he's just there to tell them, like, I hate you and you're taking too long. That's his entire purpose in life.
Let's hope that we don't run into this guy again.
Spock is wandering around trying to assess damage to the shuttle when McCoy comes out to talk to him about how that now they're stuck on the planet. Spock has a chance to prove that his logical command style is the superior way to command people. And Spock logics at him.
Spock does that a lot in this episode.
Yes.
He logics at people.
Scotty reports they've lost too much fuel to take off and they will have to lose 500 pounds if they want to get airborne. Spock says that's the weight of 3 grown men, which is exactly how many spare men they got. So,
hooray, we have extras that we don't have to keep around after this episode.
yeah, we've got 3 main characters, we've got 3 extra random people, and 1 yeoman, so.
And because this is 60s, we can't leave the lady behind, so.
Yeah. McCoy chastises him and says that they could leave the equivalent weight in equipment, that Spock says they don't typically build shuttles with a lot of spare junk lying around.
Oh, I'm having flashbacks to the cold equation again. Anyway.
Boma asks how they're going to choose who is left behind, and Spock says that I'm in command, so I'm going to choose. Of course, that's how this works.
Thanks. You now have my full confidence now that you're going to make life and death decisions about me, and I'm not the top-ranked person on here with the best skills.
Yep. He also says I will choose logically. Nothing more.
So why should I pay attention to anything you say anymore, Spock?
McCoy says that life and death aren't logical, but Spock replies that goals can always be achieved logically, which I guess is pretty true.
Yeah.
Latimer and Gaetano are sneaking around when they are suddenly surrounded by a weird scrapey noise.
Oh no.
It sounds a little like those wooden things they give you in music class when you're a kid. Like you kind of rub them with a stick and they're
the washboard sort of situation.
Yeah.
Or there's a different name for it too.
Kind of like that. Kind of like those like croaking frog things. The like wooden frog you scrape the back with a wooden stick. It's kind of like that.
Yeah. And, at this moment, I was starting to think, is this the Langoliers?
Both of them start to leave when a massive stone-tipped spear hits Latimer in the back out of nowhere.
Oh no!
Like this thing is at least 10 feet long.
Huge and large. Must be shot out from some sort of ballista or something.
Spock hears the scream. He and Boma go running. Gaetano is firing randomly at the attackers, but by the time Spock arrives, he's just sitting depressed on a rock next to Latimer's body.
As you do.
Spock examines the spear, saying that it appears to be a Folsom point, which was discovered in North America. These are incredibly complex stone tools that are considered the absolute pinnacle of flint-knapping stonework that has ever been found. Like this is probably the most complicated stone tool ever known to exist. It was made by Paleo-Indian cultures in North America during the Paleolithic era.
So way back.
About the same time that we get John from Man from Earth, actually, but different continent.
It's all coming together, man.
But anyway, just remember, this is an example of the most complicated stone tool that humans have ever made.
Yes. And it's here on this planet, and a bit bigger than usual.
Yes. Which I'm not entirely sure flint knapping would even work at this size, but okay.
I suppose maybe if the exact chemical composition of this planet was kind of funky, and just the material properties were different. I'm also sort of suspecting the gravity's different for other reasons as well, but anyway.
Boma is upset that Spock is examining the spear point instead of mourning Latimer, I guess.
Well, you warn him, I'll worry about this whole thing that might be trying to kill us thing.
Gaetano demands that they bring Latimer's body back to the ship, which I get, but is now the time?
We might be about to be murdered by a bunch of who knows whatsits. Can we run? Can we get the ship ready? Can we escape here? Guys?
On the ship, Kirk is wallowing in despair because they haven't had any luck with anything they have tried doing.
Tried everything, and for once it actually doesn't work.
Ferris again says that they are running out of time and they only have 2 hours remaining. That's like, these 2 days went by really fast.
Yes. It's like, well, we lost the shuttle. I guess we gotta go look at one of the planets. We'll wait till day 2 when they all wake up on that planet, I guess.
Back on the shuttle, they are repairing the fuel lines. McCoy and Myers have found 50 pounds worth of spare junk that they're currently carrying out of the shuttlecraft, and they say that they can find about 100 pounds more, but they'll still need to leave one man behind because they've now lost 150 pounds and they got one dead guy.
Well, still sucks for somebody.
McCoy says Spock can't leave someone now that they know there are creatures on this planet because that changes things for some reason.
I don't know why, but okay.
Yeah, you were going to leave them to die from exposure. Now you're going to leave them to die from spear-wielding aliens. That's different.
I guess their death is going to be faster, probably?
Yeah.
And that's bad?
Spock says that it's better to sacrifice one person instead of 6. That's a kind of utilitarian philosophy, but it makes sense.
And it's very, it's the kind of a notion that comes up a number of times throughout Star Trek for Spock and kind of Vulcan as a general.
It's pretty much the one quote he is known for, in fact.
Yeah. Yeah, the needs for the many outweigh the needs of the few or the one.
Yes. Boma comes in and says they're ready. Spock has no idea what he's talking about. Suggests they haven't talked about this at all. Boma says that they're ready for Latimer's funeral. He's like really confused. He's like, for Latimer's funeral? Which like, is now the time? Dude!
We're trying to save our lives here. Can you give us a minute?
Like, we are in a survival situation. Seriously. They demand that Spock speak at the burial. And when he asks if McCoy can do it, because he, like, is not emotional and has shit to do, he's like, McCoy, can you do it? McCoy gets angry and says if they all have to die there, they should at least die like men.
McCoy, I'm kind of glad you're not in charge of the situation, because that just means we're all doomed.
Spock says that by actually trying to fix things, maybe they won't all have to die.
That makes sense, you know?
And this still makes them all angry.
I'm suddenly having flashbacks to that one bit from The Simpsons from a number of years back where they're all piled into the bomb shelters, the asteroid is coming towards Springfield, and one of them says, "Oh, I feel terrible. I want to go die too."
They complete rerouting the fuel lines, but that makes it spring a leak because of the extra pressure, and now they're completely out of fuel.
Oh, gosh darn it, Scotty. I thought you were the best engineer in Starfleet.
Scotty says that there are no alternative solutions, but Spock says there are always alternatives. So
the third option.
Yeah, do a different thing. McCoy calls Spock outside because the noise that they were hearing earlier is now close to the shuttle. Gaetano says that the aliens are preparing to attack, but Bomba says that maybe they're not preparing to attack, maybe it's just a tribal rite. That Spock says that the spear point is too primitive for them to be a tribal culture.
Wait a moment, didn't we just go over how this spear point was kind of like one of the more advanced ones here?
Yes, it took archaeologists years to figure out how they made these things. This is the most complicated stone tool ever devised. It's too primitive for them to be a tribal culture. Obviously.
Clearly. Yeah.
Gaetano and Boma want to attack and kill several of the creatures so that they'll think twice about attacking them. But Spock is appalled by their low regard for life and says that attacking does seem logical, but they need to account for their responsibility to other forms of life.
So no Vulcan hello this week.
Yeah. It's like it is a very, very utilitarian mindset we're getting from Spock. It's like we have to minimize suffering to as many organisms as possible as often as we can.
Indeed. Which I guess, I can give him points for sticking to his guns there.
Yeah. Spock announces there's another option. Gaetano says that could get them killed before he even says what it is.
All right, Gaetano, are you able to share this mind-reading powers with everybody else, please?
Spock orders that they not kill the creatures, but instead just frighten them away, much to the chagrin of Gaetano.
Well, this seems like a kind of reasonable course of action if you don't want to be killing them. Besides, you guys bring your shuttlecraft in here, crash on their pile of rocks, and start messing around with who knows what their environment here. Who knows? Maybe this is like their sacred party ground where they're about to have a barbecue and you're just right on the parade, guys. You'd have no idea what's going on. You might be doing the most horrible things just being even right there where you are presently.
Yeah, so, also like this. I was watching this and going like, oh, that makes a lot of sense. If you kill them, they have a chance of getting angry and wanting revenge, like, your crew are demonstrating.
Yes.
And if you just demonstrate that you have these unbelievable super weapons that they've never seen before, like, most animals would not go near that.
Yeah.
So this makes perfect sense as a strategy and is arguably the better choice than running in and killing a bunch of them and hoping that makes them back off.
Yes. It's like, you get the threat of the threat of being harmed if you go after these weird spacemen without the motivation of getting revenge.
After a brief encounter with one of the creatures who throws a giant shield at them, just lands. It's big. It's a big shield.
It's sort of like thump off screen.
Yes.
It's. I have to maybe point out at this point that a lot of this sort of stuff with the aliens is kind of goofy in sort of the effects department, because it's sort of like, well, there's just this big thing just sort of flomping onto set. And I found it was kind of charming, actually.
Yeah, it was a little. It's just a big dude in a fuzz suit that they painted green.
Yep.
Spock orders Boma and Gaetano to fire near the creatures, and this seems to drive them off because the noise goes away.
All right, we're saved. They'll never come back.
Spock and Boma return, leaving Gaetano on watch. Back in the shuttle, Scotty has a plan. They can use the energy from their phasers to power the shuttle, but of course that means that they don't have the phasers for defense anymore.
So you give up one thing that might save our lives to get something that will more likely save our lives.
Spock decides that powering the shuttle is better because the phasers don't have any chance of getting them off planet.
That makes sense.
On the Enterprise, the transporters are finally working, as tested by beaming up exactly the same junk that they were just removing from the shuttle as spare weight.
Well, this could be, we beamed up something random. We got a bunch of stuff from like a crashed shuttle, perhaps.
Oh.
How
Kirk
weird.
decides that since the transporters are now working, they can beam down search parties.
Should we put them down right where we beamed up the stuff? No. Now, admittedly, they probably were beaming these things down and beaming right back up and all that, but we don't see them beaming them down. They're just sort of beaming them up, and it's like, well, this seems kind of weird.
Yeah, the only reason I thought it was funny is because they talked about how they don't have any spare weight on the shuttle, but apparently they're carrying around 150 pounds of inert test matter that they use for the transporters.
Yep.
Gaetano is in trouble. The creatures knock the phaser out of his hands with a rock, and then a big guy in a fuzzy suit comes and attacks him.
No. And this is another bit I found just sort of ridiculous but charming at the same time.
Yeah, it's just a dude in a giant fur suit slowly walking towards him while he cowers by some rocks.
And it relies on the nature of the camera in sort of a Lord of the Rings sort of fashion, where the guy's like closer to the camera, but sort of acting like he's closer into Gaetano there. Sorry.
Later, Spock and company find Gaetano missing. Boma complains that Spock doesn't care about them, even though Spock goes off alone and unarmed to figure out what happened to Gaetano.
That seems like he's being very brave here. So I guess you're down, 2 guys now, probably. And possibly 3 if Spock doesn't make it back. So
yeah.
You guys should be good on weight.
Spock finds Gaetano's body lying out dead on a rock. He grabs the corpse and takes it back to the shuttle, all while being chased by people throwing spears at him. One of which
Spock
clips one of the styrofoam rocks and sends styrofoam everywhere.
No, that's space rocks, man. Come on.
Yeah, they're very crumbly.
They're very, very soft and easy to chip.
McCoy criticizes Spock's earlier plan, the one that I outlined why might work better than the alternative.
Yep.
He says that showing the creatures they have superior weapons means that they need to respect them. And respect is a rational process, and the aliens might be reacting emotionally.
So I guess McCoy's arguing that these aliens are more like him than they are like Spock.
Yeah, and McCoy claims that anyone who understands emotions could have predicted this. No. No. Like, this is... You had 2 choices, either of which were equally likely to have either outcome. So, Spock made the best choice for the situation, even, understanding emotional reactions in it. This was a good choice, and they're just saying it was bad for no reason.
Well, our evidence is... Never mind, but it is bad.
One of the creatures starts banging on the top of the shuttle with a rock.
Which I also, once again, found delightful.
Yeah. Also, like, I get it. It's supposed to be strong. It's a boulder. But this is like a spaceship.
Yep.
Shouldn't it be built to put up with, like, stuff hitting it in space? There's stuff in space. Like, this shouldn't really pose much danger.
Yeah, even like an occasional micrometeorite, you should be like perfectly fine with in the future. You know, it's... And plus, the shuttle crashed on this planet. You should be able to take on a large impact without too much trouble.
Yeah. Spock is having a weird crisis. He says he's made all the most logical decisions, but 2 people have died, the creatures are attacking, and everyone hates him.
I'm suddenly having that the meme, maybe it's the children who are wrong.
Yeah. Both people died from fairly random things that no one could have predicted.
Correct.
The creatures attacking we just went through, they're scaring them off was a good plan. It just happened to not work. And there's no reason to believe that killing them would have been a better idea. And everyone hating him we'll get to later, but it's just weird. He's made good decisions and it's just worked out badly. This is not a comment on his decision-making process.
Yeah, there's a phrase which I think is applicable to this. Sometimes you can do everything correctly and still lose.
Yes.
So I will maybe offer up one suggestion for Spock to correct his behavior in the future. Next time they crash on a planet, avoid going outside.
Yeah. Also, gag McCoy early.
Oh, yeah. Just kind of neck pinch him. It'll be great.
The creatures continue to attack the ship. Everyone yells at Spock to do things. On the Enterprise, their instruments are slowly coming back on, but Ferris is back to say they only have a couple of hours left, and Kirk says that he's going to search until the very last second if he has to.
Wait a moment, a couple hours left? I thought we had 2 hours to go last time.
Me too. I can't remember if I wrote that wrong or if they just said 2 hours twice.
Huh.
Now.
Oh. Anyway. Still, Ferris is being our ticking clock again, and he's being annoying and kind of an ass.
The shuttle is still under attack, and Spock asks if the ship batteries could electrify the outside of the hull. Scotty says that they could and short-circuits the batteries until the creatures stop attacking them. I call this the 20,000 Leagues defense. They say that they won't be able to do that again or they'll drain their battery too much to take off.
Which kind of makes sense. In fact, I'm kind of worried that they maybe jumped to this a little too quickly as is. It's like, well, we should really think about it. Are we going to be able to make it without even just a little bit of power here? Because I reminded of Apollo 13 where they're like, well, how many amps do we got? Well, we got this. We need to turn this on. This is essential in order for us not to die.
Yeah, they just do things without really thinking about it in this.
Yes.
Spock starts preparing for a quick escape, tells the crew to find anything that they could leave behind to lighten the ship. Boma says that Gaetamo's body is on board, but they won't leave it without a proper burial. Spock says that's stupid, because it is.
Yep.
They will expose everyone to danger from the things that were just attacking them a minute ago.
That might still be right outside waiting for their opportunity to strike.
But Spock concedes to Boma's irrationality.
Ah, Booma. Man.
On the Enterprise, the landing party are back. They have been attacked by the same creatures that have been attacking the shuttle. Ferris reports that their time is up, but Kirk says that they still need to recall the other shuttlecraft and beam back the search parties, which is going to take 20 minutes or so.
It's like, well, our ticking clock is technically up, but we got a little more time.
A little more ticking.
Yep.
The shuttle is ready to go. Spock says they have just enough fuel to make orbit, but they are going to have to land again if need be.
So we're going to be stuck on a different part of the planet.
Yeah.
Hooray.
Spock tells McCoy and Boma they have 10 minutes for the burials.
Hurry up.
Yeah. The Enterprise is leaving. Kirk orders them to keep scanning the planet for as long as possible as they depart fairly slowly. Mm-hmm. Slower than necessary.
Yeah, no warp, just, normal engines. It's fine. Normal speed.
During the burial, the creatures attack. Who could have predicted that?
Spock did, but nobody else believed him.
They pin Spock's leg under a rock. He immediately tells everyone to leave, even though they don't seem to be like an immediate danger, and they're able to come back to him, free his leg, and get him to the shuttle in under a minute. So He's a little quick to go on the leave me behind thing.
Leave me behind. You guys hate me anyway, so it's better this way, right?
They take off, but the creatures are holding on to the shuttle, apparently.
They're really, 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 really strong.
Spock engages the boosters, but that's now cut down on how long they'll be able to stay in orbit. They keep shaving time off of this.
Yeah.
Spock, for some reason, thinks the most logical thing to have done would have been to leave him behind, because now they've used extra fuel and can't land, even though they basically couldn't land before, and they said earlier that burning up in the atmosphere would be better than dying slowly on the planet.
So it's just sort of everyone's quibbling about how doomed they want to be, and which death is preferable, and that just keeps changing depending on what minute it is.
Spock continues saying that the situation is hopeless and there's no way that the Enterprise will be able to find them. And Scotty says that there's always alternatives, and Spock says that maybe he was wrong, which delights McCoy.
McCoy, you ass.
Yes. After they try to contact the Enterprise a few times, Spock hits the jettison fuel switch, which you think you wouldn't want just sitting there on the console.
Correct. Or at least if it is, like, it's under one of those little protective covers.
Yeah.
So you have to, like, pull it up so you don't just fall on it accidentally.
Just something, except for, like, just hit this one switch and all your fuel's gone. He jettisons the fuel and ignites it, and they now only have 6 minutes until they crash, which everyone's like, why did you do that?
Well, thinking to myself, it's like, well, it's pretty obvious that maybe Spock's not showing any emotions to you guys, but he's probably concluded that you're all just too terrible to live at this point.
Yeah. Logically, I hate you. Sulu sees the burning fuel on the view screen, and Kirk orders them to turn around.
Should we continue at normal speed, Captain? Sure.
Scotty then realizes that Spock setting the fuel on fire was like a signal flare.
Oh, yes.
That Spock believes that there's no one here to see it. McCoy claims that Spock's last action was a very human reaction to things because it had no chance of working. The shuttle starts to burn up, but the Enterprise is able to beam them off at the last minute.
Hooray!
Kirk is told that 5 people were transported aboard, and everyone breathes a sigh of relief because they apparently forgot that they lost 7 people originally.
Yep. Well, 5 is better than none, so hooray!
Yeah, that seems to be the basic thing, but there's no mention of anything. It's like 5 people in the transporter. Oh, thank you. We've made it. Great.
Obviously, the main characters survived and maybe a couple extras, so that works.
So we're ahead. We're ahead by 3 because, we started with 3 main people. And we got 7 back, so we're up. After Spock and McCoy return to the bridge, Kirk asks what the logic behind it jettisoning all the fuel was.
Other than the logic.
Yeah. He says that it is an act of desperation, but that desperation is an emotion. Spock says that they had 0 chance of being rescued. They would have basically had to stay in the atmosphere for 20 minutes and then crash. So having a slim chance of being found is better than no chance at all. So it was the only logical action.
Yeah.
Everyone disbelieves him, says, "Ha ha, you acted emotionally," and laughs uproariously. Everyone on the bridge, people are coming in from off screen to laugh at Spock as we fade out.
Yeah. I think everyone on the Enterprise might be insane.
Yes. Like, what was any of that? Seriously, this is probably the worst episode so far.
As I said, it has some charm to it, but yeah, this just how everyone behaves is just what?
Yeah, there's nothing here. Like every time they're really trying. They're really, really pushing this thing of like, Spock thinks that logic is the best way to go about stuff, but he is unequivocally wrong. That is the central theme.
And we're going to do everything in our power to prove that thesis correct badly.
Yeah, like every single thing that goes wrong is either random chance. The first person who dies, like anyone would have sent out scouts. Yeah, anyone would have sent out a scouting party, and they're attacked out of nowhere by things they didn't know existed.
It's like, well, this is a planet around some sort of black holes type structure in a plasma field. So what's the chance of there being life here that is, of an intelligent capability or, at all? Probably pretty low.
Yeah, aside from the
Yeah.
fact that there's an oxygen-nitrogen atmosphere, we have no evidence of any life form on this planet anywhere.
Yeah, it's basically, dark sky and rocks until people start chucking these big rocks at them and all that.
Yeah, the attack, as we said, has a pretty equal chance of driving them off or not.
Yeah.
The only thing that he arguably was being a little bit callous about was we're going to have to leave people behind and I'm in command, so I have to make that decision. Mm-hmm. But that's how this command thing works.
Yes, you guys are in a structure that you are supposed to be following orders for. Could you maybe, I don't know, respect that somehow?
Every other thing that goes wrong is Spock is trying to act like he is in a survival situation. Like anyone, you don't have to be the super unemotional logical guy. Anyone in command of this should have been acting about this same way because you're in a survival situation.
Yeah.
You don't have time to get emotional and mourn people and bury the dead. You are in a survival situation.
We were just attacked by a bunch of aliens that want us dead. Why are you wanting to go bury the body right now when we have 5 minutes to go?
Yeah, it's okay, we barely got rid of the aliens. They're definitely coming back. We have 5 minutes to take off in what we know is a very limited window when the Enterprise will still be there. Mm-hmm. Fine, you want to bury the bodies. Go right ahead. Eventually, it's just Spock. The only emotion Spock has in this is just getting fed up with people. It's fine, do your stupid emotional thing. See what it gets you.
Spock's just tired of your crap. Just do whatever, stay out of Scotty's way, and let us get our stuff done.
Spock is acting normally. He's not acting unemotionally. He's acting normally. Any person in command of this mission should be doing all of the things he's doing.
Yes.
He acts perfectly through the entire thing. I spent the entire episode thinking, oh, this is going to be Spock's big, redemption episode. Mm-hmm. Everyone's criticizing his logical stuff, and he's going to get everyone off the planet and be good, and everyone's going to be well, I guess you're right. Your way of commanding does work. Instead, he gets everyone off the planet, and everyone goes, oh, you must have used emotion. Ha.
So, in other words, everyone on the Enterprise has this kind of awful bias against Spock, not just McCoy. They, it's yes, Spock, he's the logical one, so we're going to do everything in our power because we don't like him for some reason, to basically embarrass him, even though that doesn't really work, given his not using emotions thing. But we're going to keep doing it, and even if it gets us all killed in the process.
Yeah, they did this thing where you succeeded, right? This is a better outcome than you thought you could have at the beginning, because in the beginning they said you have to leave 3 people on the planet, and mm-hmm. he only lost 2.
Yes. And they weren't because of his decisions there.
Yeah, so this is the absolute best outcome you could have possibly gotten. And everyone goes, well, you succeeded, but that doesn't prove that your methods work. It means you must have been using our methods.
Oh, man. This reminds me of so many situations throughout my life and the world around us. It's people just sort of taking credit for other people's hard work. And, it's well, obviously it's because of me. But did you do anything? Nope. But you used exactly what I would have done to do it, so I'm awesome.
Well, it's not even that. I've seen people doing this, and I can't think of a good specific example that I could cite easily. But it's basically I have a different moral philosophy than you do. And mm-hmm. I'm getting things done with it. I'm being successful at what I'm doing using my philosophy that is different from yours. But you are claiming that the fact of my success means I must secretly or unknowingly actually be using your philosophy, because mine is obviously wrong.
Yeah. And that's just complete nonsense there.
So I guess it does give us a bit of an opportunity to talk about this stupid thing they keep doing of the pure logic versus pure emotion argument. Because the argument of this episode is not you should perform logical things but use emotion to inform your decisions. Yeah. The argument of this episode is logic is stupid. Our completely illogical, irrational, purely emotional reactions were better.
Despite there not being any evidence of that.
Now, I was doing some digging the last couple days, and I cannot find a philosophy that says you should not use emotions at all.
Yeah.
For anything. Like I was looking at like Descartes and Stoicism, because they're a little bit less on the emotional side of things. But both of them, so Descartes' thing is not logic versus emotion, it's rationality versus religion.
Yes. So
Which
it's a little bit different.
Yeah, a bit different. The Stoics were a little less emotional, but their thing was extreme pessimism. Don't look forward to things and say it'll be okay, because that'll set you up for disappointment, but go into every situation thinking that the worst is going to happen.
And then you might be pleasantly surprised instead.
Well, also, you're going to be fine for some random unknown reason. But, that's just... They weren't saying don't have emotions. They were saying weather adversity without showing too much emotion.
Yes.
No one has ever used this philosophy of we should have pure logic unemotionalism.
I guess until Spock showed up.
Well, also, a really interesting thing watching this now that I can't get out of my head every time they do this thing with Spock is how much they're coming down on the pure emotion is better. You should make super emotional decisions and not use rationality at all. Because right now, in our current culture, we have such a big thing of rationality.
Yes.
We want to say we're taking emotion out of all of our decision making and we are making purely rational, logical decisions. Like, if this was made today, this episode would be the opposite. It would be like, your emotionalism is getting in the way of our survival. Turn it off.
Yes. And, eventually one of the survivors will be like coming to Spock afterwards like, you're right, man. I don't know what happened. I just kind of lost control. I'm scared, and et cetera, and sort of have a heartfelt apology. And Spock would be like, well, it was only logical. You had these emotions. You're only human. And then they, have the end of the episode at that point, still with laughter potentially.
Yeah, it's very weird that we had such a dramatic shift from the 60s to now.
Mm-hmm.
I just can't get over how, every single thing in this is... Logic is stupid. Stop using it. Let's make the most emotional reaction we possibly can. They attacked us. I'm angry. Let's slaughter all of them. That's the best choice.
Yeah. I have to disagree with the whole kill them all philosophy that guy was kind of advocating for. It just... I don't know. In addition to not being very logical in the situation, it's also kind of cruel.
Well, here's the weird thing. So that may or may not work if you were assuming that these are pack animals.
Mm-hmm.
If you kill a member of a pack animal, there's a chance that they're going to oh, that's dangerous, don't go near that. That suggests a fairly intelligent, family-oriented species like wolves or crows. They do this kind of thing. Crows more so hate you forever and ever and ever. But but the reason that they say Spock's idea of scaring them fails is because they're too emotional. And if they're too emotional, they would want revenge the same as you. Also, fear is not respect. Fear is an emotional reaction. You want to make them afraid of you. You don't want to make them respect your power.
Indeed.
Also, that's a very 60s patriarchal norm that they're working off of, that fear and respect are synonymous.
I'm suddenly having thoughts back to some of the stuff I've heard of people trying to justify the Vietnam War. It's like, yeah, we have to show those commies by bombing them more so they respect us. No, that they might be fearing us for that whole bombing them a lot here, guys, but it's not necessarily respect. It's more of, there's more going on than what you're trying to suggest here, guy.
Yeah, this whole you will respect my power idea is insane. Doesn't make any sense, and we need to stop using it.
Yes.
I wish I had a better, philosophically sounding bow to wrap that in, but stop doing that. Stop it.
It's a philosophy that has been in practice, but is not well formed. It's not really argued for other than in the sort of general culture.
one of the reasons that I think this episode doesn't really make sense is because it's actually based very heavily on an earlier movie.
I was unaware of that. Give me the rundown.
It's called Five Came Back.
I guess that the numbers match up. I think that's legit. Okay.
Yeah.
Go.
It actually, one of the starring actors in it was Lucille Ball. Was one of her early roles as a dramatic actor. And it's a plane flight. I forget where they're going, but they wind up crashing somewhere in South America. There's I think 9 crew members or 9 passengers and a few crew members. I think it winds up being about 11 people. Mm-hmm. And they crash land and then discover that they don't have enough, fuel in the plane to get everyone off. And they're going to have to leave 3 or 4 people behind.
So that kind of sucks.
Yeah, only 5 people will be able to fit on the plane for them to leave. And then apparently this story takes place over a couple of months of just character interaction and discussion. And then you actually have a lot of you have an older couple who their kind of philosophy of this is well, I'm kind of enjoying this last grand adventure because, I've lived my life and now I get to have this kind of fun, unexpected adventure right at the end of it. And then you have some younger people who are using this as well, now I'm in a horrible survival situation. I need to deal with my kind of past demons and improprieties in order to be okay with myself enough to believe that I should survive this.
Yeah, so it's basically using the situation to both give us insight into the characters and how they are evolving throughout this situation.
Yeah, it turns into more of a character study than this does. Though this is trying to be kind of a Spock-centered character study, it fails miserably.
I guess to an extent, there is maybe one moment where Spock's sort of, quote, evolving when he's well, I've done everything correctly, but it's not working.
Yeah, but it's not working because your crew members are not taking your orders.
Yes.
And this is also where the kind of racist, tribal, non-tribal, savage things show up from the planet, because they discover later on in the movie that the jungle they've landed in is full of headhunters.
What?
Yeah.
So we got some hostile natives here. They're obviously out to kill us. Oh no.
Yep. One guy gets killed by a poison dart. Yeah, that's just general racism, the colonial othering of native peoples, and just sort of a force of nature. These savage indigenous peoples are going to come get us, so we have to quell them for our own good.
So who's being all about the fear now, eh?
Yeah. And actually they never kill any of the creatures in this episode.
Yes. So I guess it's better on that front.
Yeah, a little bit, except for the weird the equating of just the fact of having a stone tool means you are too primitive to even have a tribal culture.
Yeah.
Also, they use tribal culture as maybe they're just doing something stupid because tribal culture.
Well, they have to have a reason for this, an excuse, and this, I don't know. I don't think they know what tribal culture actually entails here.
Oh, no, they don't.
Yeah. Well, I guess in their defense, they weren't expecting to be landing on a planet and needing to study alien civilization and this study of a quasar-like phenomenon.
Yeah.
So maybe they just don't have any experts there or anyone who's read anything on the subject.
So they have the engineer for some reason. I saw a thing that was just why are any of these characters here? The only reason Scotty is here is to fix the shuttle if the shuttle crashes.
Yep.
But why do you need the chief engineer to do this?
Maybe he just needed to get out more, and he's hey, can I just kind of tag along, guys?
Yeah. So I don't know. I'm just struggling a little. I have some little things written down about Descartism and having to use emotions in general. And I'm kind of struggling with what else to say about the episode, because the whole thing, it's just, I really, really want to try not to tear these episodes apart. That's not why I wanted to do this show.
Yeah.
They did everything wrong.
Well, I guess I do have a little bit of something to talk about, sort of going back to the notion that, we're going to have to leave some people behind. It's a ethical question right there that they sort of gloss over in end up having to, being able to ignore. But in this situation, which one of which three crew members would they need to be leaving behind if they are going to be doing this, according to Spock's logic? So we got the rundown is Spock, the guy in command, who's making all the command level decisions and is probably a pretty smart guy. You got Scotty, who is the engineer sort of fellow and could be potentially useful if the shuttle is in liftoff and needs a quick repair. You got the Dr. McCoy, another well qualified individual who that if they get to orbit and are able to survive there or end up having to crash land again and manage to survive that, he might be of use to keep them alive at that point. And then you got the rest of them. So,
yeah.
So which ones do we keep then?
Well, see, there's a thing in this, like, you get the stupid trope of like, well, of course the named characters have to survive. Yes. And when you're dealing with random death, that makes sense. Like this, why does the random thing that kills someone unexpectedly always happen to the random dude? In this kind of thing, like the main named characters are the second in command of the ship, the chief engineer, and the chief medical officer. Like, of course, those are the ones you want to bring back to the ship.
But the question is, who else are they going to bring along? And I guess so it's sort of more of a selecting of one person here, because if they have to leave three out of the 7, that 4, and they already filled up 3 slots. So I guess for 60s TV rules, that means it's going to be Ewan Mears. But just taking a step back, if you're sort of playing the ethics game here, I'm reminded of a class I took back in graduate school, where basically it's like the situation where there's like, okay, you got a boat, and there's this many life rafts, and the boat is sinking. You have maybe an hour to figure this out before everyone is in the water, and you have to be going. So you have this many slots. How many of them do you fill, and with who? And it gives down a full rundown in the thought experiment of the backgrounds of the people with their experts, their expertise, their ages, their relations to other people that are involved, etc., to try to have you question, okay, so what assumptions and rationales are you using to generate your list of people? And it's to a certain degree, it's sort of to suss out less about the end decision, but what you value in the people around you. This was a perfect opportunity for them to do this in this episode, but they just don't. But that's sort of what I want to talk about a little bit. I would love, if this had been the core of this episode. Ignore the stuff with the aliens, ignore the stuff with logic versus emotion. Make this the central argument of the episode entirely, and maybe they do have to end up leaving somebody behind, but or maybe they figure out a way to save them all, or something like that. And I think that'd be a much more interesting rundown of events.
It would have, except it doesn't exactly work once you bring in the military command structure that they have. Because obviously the 3 lowest ranked people, they are like the least important, because that's how a military works.
Well, I would also maybe argue that, if there was no, alien life forms trying to kill them on the planet, they could have a situation that's like, well, we could have a situation where, all right, there's going to be people getting on the shuttle that are going to most likely be rescued, but the rest of these guys are possibly going to survive on this planet. So maybe we should be trying to figure out which one of them is most likely to survive on the planet, and which of us are going to be put on the shuttle because they're just going to have no chance, to keep the people on the planet left behind alive.
Yeah, they also never really came up with any alternative plans of the being attacked. They put that in for the extra pressure. But if they were just doing we need to leave someone behind, which they were saying in the beginning, that was the original issue.
Yeah.
You leave some people behind. You know about where they are. You make a visual pass and go, okay, this is about what the area looks like on the planet. We're in this kind of location on the continent.
Mm-hmm.
You go up to the ship. You agree that we're going to come back in 30 minutes with an empty shuttle. And you guys, all phaser a big rock or something so it heats up and creates a bright spot for us to find, since we kind of know the general area to look for you in now. and then we come down and just pick up the rest of you in half an hour.
Exactly.
Like they don't explain why there are others, like why this stuff doesn't work. Also, interestingly, at the very beginning, they have the like, oh, would you draw lots, or is he going to make the decision? And Spock goes, well, of course I'm going to make the decision. I'm the commanding officer. Makes sense, military context thing. But this is exactly the crime that Kodos the Executioner was accused of in Conscience of the King, is choosing which people live and die arbitrarily in a survival situation.
So in the election of Kodos versus Spock, and Spock wins, you will be able to say that you voted for Kodos then.
Yeah,
because they have the same program. Anyway, Simpsons reference. Anyway, going forward,
I did have a kind of like there was this thing I remembered from a while ago about how not having emotions doesn't work at all. Which I know in the thing with Vulcans, they like have emotions, they just suppress them. Which we haven't gotten fully into. We have Spock has emotions because he's half human. But later on in Star Trek series, they say like all Vulcans have emotions. They just use meditation, a bunch of other things to completely suppress their emotions.
Yes, and in fact, I've run into some supplementary outside material that suggests that there are some Vulcans that do have emotion, but they only allow certain types of emotion forward, like joy. That is an acceptable emotion, but it's not something that you seek out. It's sort of if you are going to experience it, that it is actually logical to let yourself experience it, to help cope with this not having emotion for anything else sort of thing.
I really, really hope Vulcan brains work differently than ours.
Yes,
because that will mess you up.
Yes,
that is like not good. Parts of you are going to be suppressed that are going to find it necessary to take very extreme actions to be heard. And
that will eventually lead you to a viewing of the world that may seem logical to yourself, but which is highly flawed. And so your rundown of actions is going to be in a potentially very harmful fashion.
Well, see, you have a couple things here. So part of you that is very intellectual will kind of take over. You will have this in my school of psychology. This is called a manager. It manages other things in your system. So you would give that one a huge amount of power in your internal system because you want to be intellectualizing everything. It would push down the parts of you that are having emotions because you don't want them there anymore. But they are still going to feel a need to be heard. Like, if you do this, like, the parts of you that get pushed down are going to not be happy about it. You're going to wind up with internal conflicts. And the more you don't listen to parts of yourself, and the more suppressed they feel, the more desperate they become. And so they take extreme actions. This is where a lot of stuff like self-harm and what we would call irrational outbursts stem from, is just this extreme need to take an action that gets them noticed and heard.
Yes.
And in addition to that, you have like a subset of the managers, which are classed as firefighters, who take very strong immediate actions to try to tamp down on this kind of behavior they deem as unacceptable, which is some other irrational outbursts or throwing things or yelling. Like anything you think of as like an extreme emotional reaction is coming from that kind of setup.
Yes.
So you're going to wind up with a very, very messed up internal system.
A lot of internal conflicts, one part of yourself basically fighting constantly against other parts.
Yeah. And that was a lot of explaining of how, I think of this stuff, but I find it a very useful way to be able to think of your system.
So hopefully the Vulcans got a different sort of system going on that basically streamlines the system so that there's going to be less conflict between these different parts.
Yeah.
And their motivations.
So like I was saying, obviously the Vulcan logic system is informed by emotion. Because otherwise you are incapable of making decisions.
Because in order to make a decision, you need to have some sort of value to judgment already made, and the location for where you get that value judgment is not something you can quite logic up.
So there was a thing that I remembered from a while ago, and I was able to find it. There was this person named Elliot in this case study. There was a neuroscientist named Antonio Damasio, who you can look up for this case study thing. There's a guy named Elliot, or identified as Elliot, who is a businessman who had a tumor in his frontal lobe. And when they removed it, for whatever random reason, because we still don't really understand how these parts of the brain interact, removing that tumor had completely cut off his emotions. So he was still very, very smart. They go out of their way in the thing to say he still had a very high IQ and was still very intelligent. But he was incapable of making decisions and completely disengaged from the world. He had no hint of emotion, like, at all. You couldn't engage him emotionally. And without emotion, you can make some decisions logically, because you can look at it and go like, well, should I, eat breakfast or not? Like, do I have time for breakfast? There's all this little set of things, and sometimes you can come up with a, yes, I need to eat to live, so I should eat. And sometimes you don't. But if you have something like, should I have eggs for breakfast or toast for breakfast? There's no particular upside or downside to either of those decisions. They are logically equivalent. And the only way you can make a tie-breaking decision like that is to have an emotional reaction to it.
Yes, well, I prefer the toast here, so I'm going to have the toast.
Yeah, so like emotions are called a shortcut in decision making. They are ways that you react to a situation that shortcuts all of the logical thinking you would have to do in order to make a decision. And if you're trying to work through decisions purely logically, they give you that tiebreaker, because 90% of the decisions you make every day have no, logically correct outcome.
Indeed.
It's basically your mental coin flip.
Well, I need a deciding vote, and everyone in my internal parliament is split up in the exact equal portions. You over there, what you feeling? I feel like going out to eat tonight. Okay, let's go out to eat tonight.
Yeah, your emotions are like how parts of your system communicate needs to you easily. A lot of them seem to be used for like instinctive reactions and motivations. And without them, you just can't do anything.
So I guess, speaking of instinct, does this mean that Vulcans are also suppressing instinct, in the general sense? Because, if they sort of view that as a component of the whole emotional complex, then that would be something to be also opposing?
I suppose you get into some weird stuff and being able to tell in a very complicated system like ours what is an instinct and what is a learned behavior and what is a other thing. Like, I guess they would say that they are suppressing instinct the same way they say they are suppressing emotion, but obviously still are using emotional informed decisions.
Yes.
I'm kind of reminded of the movie Equilibrium.
Oh yeah,
which is a really good movie. We might do it at some point. Everyone in the Equilibrium world takes pills that suppress their emotions. And the justification for this is that emotion has caused all of the great evils of the world, of war and murder and, whatever, have all been emotionally driven.
And then they live in a world where there is still violence of a sort.
Yeah, so it doesn't make any sense. But I saw a interview with the director, and they had a thing of like, we kept getting criticism of like, they are showing emotion. You can see them having emotions in like this scene, even though they're supposed to be on these pills, and taking criticism for this. And he basically said, well, do you want a really boring movie where everyone acts completely unemotionally all the time? Or do you want a movie exploring the purposes of emotion in a fascist dictatorship with actors who can show some emotion and make it interesting?
Isn't part of the plot that there's at least some folks that are sort of bucking the system there?
Yeah, but just it's basically like it's basic storytelling. Do you want it to be 100% realistic? No, because that's boring and stupid, and you don't want to watch that.
Yeah, it kind of goes back to the bit with the cheesiness of the aliens on the planet. It's like, yeah, this looks goofy as hell, but I'm cool with it because it's like, yeah, it's just kind of representational. It's also kind of like what they had to work with at the time. So it's like, all right, it could be a lot more awful in various fashions. It could be not. They could just avoid showing the aliens at all. And that would be kind of a little bit of a mystery, but it'll get kind of lame after a while. But having at least some sense of the world there, even if it's not quite as quote as it should be, that works.
Yeah. You have some scenes that are just obviously a stagehand behind one of the rocks throwing spears.
Yep.
The cheesiness of the alien attacks is at least fun to watch in this.
Yes. So the philosophy sucks, but fun to watch.
I'm out of philosophy stuff for this one.
I think that's most of the stuff I wanted to talk about as far as that stuff goes.
You want to go on to awards or random facts first?
Let's go awards and then random facts.
Sounds good.
So my first award is Space as Ocean, because today we got space weather.
Oh, yeah. I hadn't thought of that. It is definitely just a hurricane and an island.
It's like, our little boat has got caught in the storm and it's now lost in that sea. But maybe they landed on this little island over here. So let's go check out the island and all that fun stuff. My second award is Everything You Know Is Wrong, and I think we've gone over some of this in extensive detail, both as far as the psychology, logic versus emotion. What is a quasar? It's a lot bigger than they have right here. Sorry, guys.
Yeah, I'm sorry. I started this show saying, let's not just nitpick everything and tear the episodes apart, but sometimes there's just nothing there. Everything is so wrong, you can't talk about anything that isn't wrong.
I'll hold off on the Weird Al tune here for the moment. And finally, what chain of command for people that seem super eager, just kind of ignoring it?
Yeah, every single thing that happens bad in this episode is because people are not following orders.
So I guess if you could fix one of those two there, the chain of command or Everything You Know Is Wrong, this would be a lot better episode.
Well, apparently, so this is of course non-canonical for what that's worth, but apparently there is a book that follows up with some of these characters in the greater Star Trek lore, where Boma is court-martialed.
Oh, I guess who could have seen that coming?
Scotty brings him up on charges for this. So yes, finally, some justice in the world.
Well, I guess during this entire episode, Scotty's just kind of has his face to the grindstone there, just kind of doing all the stuff to get the shuttle up and running again. And it just kind of, he's almost like a piece of the set at various points, occasionally giving them updates and all that. But he seems kind of disconnected for all the sniping back and forth.
Yeah.
And so I guess reasonably it's like, well, yeah, Boom over there was kind of an ass and was making everything more difficult for everybody. So, yeah.
Yeah, Scotty sat there, followed orders, did his work the whole time, and got everyone off the planet.
Yes. But does Scotty get any thanks? No. Spock? No. McCoy, he'll probably get a commendation for this for some reason.
I didn't think so. So I thought the camera work in this was hilarious.
A bit, yeah.
Because the tight in shots in the shuttle interior, everyone has to crawl around on the floor the entire episode.
Yep.
Because the camera can't be far back enough to show the entire interior.
So it's sort of we're kind of looking up at people at times, and it's kind of fun.
And it's just so awkward. They will throw at one point the yeoman has to run forward to say something, and instead of jumping out of her chair and running forward, she falls out of her chair and crawls along the floor.
Yep. It's like, what are you doing?
And there is enough room to stand in this thing. Initially I thought it was because the set was too small, but they have a shot of Spock walking fully upright inside the set. So it's just a camera work limitation.
Which, it's a problem that was a technical issue, and it's not really something to, necessarily knock the episode for, but it is kind of amusing to watch.
Yeah. I also thought This is just like completely unrelated to the episode at large, but like the Netflix description of this episode just exemplifies most, I think, episodes of original series. Because the description is Spock, Bones, Scotty, and others crash land.
So the named characters and some red shirts that may or may not survive. We'll find out.
Yeah, it's just, you named characters and others. The only like actual kind of point of interest, slight trivia thing that was for this episode is this is the first time we see the shuttlecraft, like for the Enterprise. And one of the reasons they didn't have the shuttlecraft is because they couldn't afford to build the shuttlecraft set. And a toy company, AMT Toys, contacted Desilu Studios and basically said, we will build you a shuttlecraft model, like a large-scale model that you can use in shots, which is actually a bit smaller, and the set itself.
Yes.
In exchange for exclusive rights to sell Star Trek model kits. Like, they built it for free in exchange for this toy-making contract.
That seems like a pretty good deal, honestly.
It really was, because they made bank on these things.
Yes.
It was a very, very successful decision that made them a lot of money.
Yeah. In fact, I have no idea if it would be the same company, when I got them. But I myself had several Star Trek, model kits and things like that when I was growing up. I tried to paint some of them. I only managed to ever finish the Bird of Prey.
Yeah, so did I. I had a Enterprise model kit that I turned into the kind of spiky version from both the pilot and Mir. But I had kind of forgotten about that until we started recording these. Then I was just like, what ever happened to that thing? It just disappeared.
It's lost in space and time.
Probably when I moved, but I have no idea what happened to that.
Yeah, I have no idea where my models went as well. They might be in a box in my closet somewhere, but I have no idea.
Now you need to put them on your desk because you officially work in Star Trek stuff now.
Well, maybe after I do my move, I'll open up some of the boxes I haven't touched for a few years.
Well, that does it for Galileo 7. Mm-hmm. It's altogether a very unenjoyable experience.
Unless you like, cheap sets.
Yeah, the cheesiness brought a little back, but overall it was just really, really... And I don't think things are going to improve.
Well, so what are our chances for next week, you think?
Next week's episode is the Squire of Gothos with 2 O's. So I think they've heard it say Gathos, but it's spelled Gothos.
So it's like Otho from the Beetlejuice movie, except with more letters.
Yeah. I believe this is one of our Q-like entity episodes. Yes. There's definitely some things to talk about for this first that they have, but none of it is good. So there's that. I've heard some people discuss this before. I really hope I'm remembering the right episode, because if I am not, I've built up this huge thing for nothing.
Well, I guess tune in next week and find out if Gepwin is on top of things, or we're going to be confused in some fashion.
Yeah, join us next week to figure out if I'm an idiot on Watchers of Tomorrow.
Next time on Watchers of Tomorrow, ultra-powerful aliens just want to play. You have been listening to Watchers of Tomorrow, a podcast on science fiction media. Find and follow Watchers of Tomorrow on Podbean, YouTube, Spotify, iTunes, Google Play, Stitcher, Pocket Cast, Spreader, Digital Podcasts, and perhaps many more to come. If you enjoy our podcast, make sure to subscribe for more. And where possible, make sure to rate your experience or leave us a review. You may find Gepwin on youtube.com/Gepwin and Twitter @Gepwin. You may find me, Dr. Isix, on youtube.com/Dr. Isix and Twitter @IsixLP. Music is Waveform and Maury's Principle, both by DRKRN. You can also check out the Watchers of Tomorrow Discord channel. Make sure to share the experience with your friends, family, enemies, and alien overlords. If you feel you are suffering from transporter syndrome, please be aware that the next time you step off the transporter, that you, that is now, no longer exists.